So it's been a while since we've done one of these, and so obviously we're doing one now, and there must be a purpose, and I'll get there here in a moment. But I want to take you on a little bit of a journey by going back and telling a story of an experience I had while experiencing South Africa for the first time. We're flying into Johannesburg. It's a first world airport. There is a incredibly large mall that is more beautiful than any of the malls in this region. It's definitely first world, gorgeous. But yet next to that airport and that mall, literally on the other side of a block wall, was a shanty town, or a township as they call it, that had thousands of people in a very small space. And it was a strange thing to my eyes to see something that is so first world, but yet third world right next to it. And as I discovered in my travels to South Africa over time, I learned what creates such situations. It's bad policy, quite frankly, that can create those striking disparities that happen in society when much of the southern tier of Africa was in transition from apartheid to indigenous rule. It was a messy journey for many of those countries, and as a result, impoverished means issues of hunger, lack of jobs. Society was imploding on itself. Ending apartheid, while was needed, it wasn't done very well, that transition, except for South Africa. Again, we know much of the stories of how Mandela did a great job in transitioning, where he was careful to not repeat the failures of Zimbabwe and other countries. But one thing that did happen during that time, while they were making sure the transition from apartheid to indigenous rule was being done constructively in South Africa, they didn't value their borders well enough. They didn't create a control of healthy immigration. And as a result, in a very short window of time, a country that was made up of about 12 million people nearly doubled in size in about a 5-year span. Needless to say, it overwhelmed the economy, it overwhelmed society's ability to provide jobs, provide food, infrastructure for all that. There wasn't housing for that. A country can't double in size in such a short period and do so well. And as a result, crime went through the roof. People were trying to feed themselves. They had no means to care for their loved ones, and so they resorted to crime. And so here it is. That all happened in the 1990s, and it's 20 plus years later, and there's still challenge there from that season of time. They now control their borders, but those millions that came in a short period are still there and now multiplied, and the country is yet to really recover from that failed policy. And so I share that to say some of the dialogue in our political realm about securing borders is an important discussion, and quite frankly, an important matter of national security. And so there is need for policy, there's need for healthy immigration. But in the discourse of discussing issues of securing our borders and determining, how much of a flow of immigration we can have, we've all been frustrated by the dialogue and the decisions, and maybe even very frustrated at what we see in the present climate of a lack of clear direction on immigration. But what this has done to our psyche as people in America is that we forget that we're all rooted from immigrants. And so there does need to be secure borders. There does need to be an addressment of how we handle immigration. And it's of huge interest to our country that we do so. While that is something I have opinions on, I've had experiences that informs me as to why I have those opinions, that is political. That is the policy discussions of our country. But what isn't up for discussion is God's heart for the immigrant itself. Again, it's not about the policy itself, but when there is an immigrant that lives among you, or a foreigner, or a stranger from another place that lives among you, there is a heart that we are to have towards them that reflects God's heart. When you look at throughout Scripture, God is pretty consistent about his care for the foreigner. In particular, when you read what he said in Leviticus, which was again written to the nation of Israel as they're preparing to go into the promised land. So these are going to be the set of rules that they live by. It's kind of their first attempt at a constitution, if you will. And he says this in Leviticus 19, when a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you are foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So, direct statement from God, and saying to the Israelites, when you get this land and it's yours, treat the foreigner as if they were your own. So treat them with love, kindness, care, meeting their needs as possible. Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 5 to 7. So this would be later, a few hundred years later, where it says, if you really change your ways and your actions and deal with each other justly, if you do not oppress the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not follow other gods to your own harm, then I, as God, will let you live in this place, in this land I gave your ancestors forever and ever. So, entry into the land, God's saying, care for the foreigner as if they were your own. Now that they're in the land, if you want to keep this land forever and ever, do not oppress the foreigner. Do not oppress the widow. Do not oppress people that are fatherless, the orphan. So the foreigner is included with orphans and widows. So there's something about the justice of God's heart that we are to care for those that are in our midst that are from other places, because they're at a great disadvantage among us. Deuteronomy Chapter 10 says this, God defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and he loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. Again, God's putting himself on record that he loves the foreigner, and that we're to care for them, again, as if they were our own. So it's not a mystery as to God's heart for those who are foreigners. He definitely is for them, and how we treat them, how we care for them. So you say, well, you've mentioned all Scripture from the Old Testament. Well, what does the New Testament say? Jesus talks about how we should live as foreigners and strangers here on this earth, and as one that is cared for. And then we're to be careful how we treat people that are our neighbors, regardless of whether or not they're the same. But I particularly love Hebrews chapter 13, where it says, keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have actually shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. So continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering. So the charge to the early church was to care for prisoners as if you were in there with them, to care for those who are being mistreated as if you were suffering with them, and to care for the foreigner because we are foreigners here on this earth. So again, the heart of God hasn't shifted, it hasn't changed. So you're probably wondering, then why this video? Okay, you've made your case. God cares about the foreigner, he cares about the immigrant. And you've acknowledged that, yes, there are concerns about healthy immigration. There are concerns about securing our borders. But why the reminder of God's heart for the foreigner? Well, first of all, I believe it's because we can get so fed up with the policies that we end up demonizing the people. And the people who are foreigners, who are immigrants, are made in the image of God, and they are in need of the gospel. At a time when the world is not letting us go to them because travel is pretty restricted. So our global mission strategies right now are pretty hindered. But while that is the case, the world is actually coming to us. And so we have an opportunity to show love and compassion and the gospel with people from all over the world because they're coming here. And a unique opportunity is coming very soon. As you're aware, in a few weeks ago, President Biden withdrew our troops from Afghanistan. And while that may not have been the wisest process by how he's done so, as part of that process, they have escorted thousands of Afghanistan citizens away from that country and taken them to other places in the world to naturalize them somewhere else because they were friendly and helpful to Americans. And we have learned that many Afghanis will actually be settled, at least temporarily, here in the Lancaster area. And we know that many of these particular immigrants wanted to come here because they saw something in America that was worth fighting alongside of, that was worth partnering with when we were on the ground in their country. And now they're in our country. And part of what they received and heard about when they were in their own country with our American soldiers there was that there is a Christian faith that is prevalent in this nation. And I want them, as they come here, to discover that Christian faith is real, authentic, and we're aligned with the heart of God. And so if they're going to be here among us, that they would get to see our love, our compassion, and God's love and heart for them, and to understand that God's greatest love for them is Jesus Christ, whom they may have never heard of. And so we are going to be seeking out opportunities to work with these Afghan families that are coming into the area. So regardless of what I think politically, I am about to receive neighbors from a country that our soldiers have been living in for quite some time. And so as a church, we embrace the heart of God for the foreigner who's going to live among us, and we care for them as if they were a native born, just as Scripture said. And along the way, while we're caring for them, we get to share the good news of Jesus Christ. So, having said that, you will be hearing in the weeks ahead opportunities where you as a family, or maybe your life group, can adopt an Afghan family and begin to help them integrate into a home here in Lancaster County. There's many different ways we can help, and we'll get more information as we go along here. But I felt like you needed to understand the heart behind this, that it's not a political statement. It is a divine statement of compassion and care. So would you join us in showing the love of Christ to the foreigner who is about to live among us? And if you are open to that, then be praying that God would lead you in the process of what it might mean and who you might include as part of that journey. So I hope you receive this as a good word and that it will affect your heart going forward. God bless.